Okay, so now that we have um, final impressions for, or taken a reline impression of the upper and max and mandibular acrylic bases, now we need to make a master cast to continue with the laboratory work. So in order to make a master cast, whether you're doing a relined impression or you're actually working on a new case, as you've seen before, the technique to follow here would be the beading and boxing technique. So we're going to apply some utility wax around the periphery of the upper and lower impressions here, or dentures for that matter. And we're also going to apply some boxing wax. I like to use just regular base plate wax instead of boxing wax because it's so much taller, a lot easier to use. But it all depends on your preference. So the first thing to consider, I'll start with the upper. Now these impressions here, they're not exactly from an actual client. These are simulation cases, but quite typically what you'll have when you're working with clients, you'll get a nice roll of the PVS material, and we have to apply a strip of beading wax here, or utility wax for that matter, and only block out about 3 to 4 millimeters of the periphery. Only expose about 3 to 4 millimeters of the periphery. In essence, we want it to be about 2 or 3, but I'm going to leave it just a little bit higher so I can cut it back and give me a nice ledge, as you'll see later on when we start carving back the final master cast. So what I'm going to do here to ensure that the beading wax itself adheres, because if you just take regular utility wax and try to pinch it against the PVS material, it won't stick. It'll just peel away. So you can use some sticky wax. I prefer just regular base plate wax because it's in my Bunsen burner. But note here that the wax does not go all the way down to the periphery. It's kept about 3 to 4 millimeters short of the periphery, and I'm going to do this all the way around. It doesn't matter how close you get to the teeth. It's all going to get cleaned up, but try not to get too high. There's more work to do if you do, but if you did, it's not detrimental. I had a bit of a void back here. If this was an actual case and this happened to you with your clients, you could go back and add some material and correct it, or for whatever reason you didn't see it, because it's not on the tissue bearing side, you can just fill it up with a little bit of wax. And I'll do the same thing on the upper. So again, stay 3 to 4 millimeters short of the edge of the periphery with your base plate wax. Just flow a little bit of wax, just the width of my spatula tip, really. And I'm going to flow a little bit back here, just past the edge of the impression or the posterior border. Okay, so from this point on, I can take a strip of utility wax. Some are square, some are round. But certainly you can shape it with your hands. I like the square finish. This one doesn't, it's not quite square when I peel it out of the box, but because it's so malleable, I can just shape it with my hands a little bit. Okay, I'm going to start on one side. And I'm going to try to keep this wax about 3 to 4 millimeters from the edge of the periphery. Ultimately, I want this master cast to finish about a millimeter below that, somewhere here. Now I'm going just a little bit higher. I'm leaving myself about a millimeter of land area so I can trim it back and make it look nice. And back here, I'm just going to cover about halfway. And I'll just heat up my instrument and cut that off. So from here on, I'm going to seal the wax to the denture base as well as the impression material. You can start from the top to ensure things don't move around. So I'm just going to heat up my instrument. I'm not adding any more wax here. I'm just going to heat up my instrument and melt the wax up against the acrylic base, or if you're doing a new case, up against the custom tray. So in this video segment, I'm going to show you how to pour a master cast utilizing the beading and boxing technique and just the beading technique. So I'm going to bead and box the maxillary impression, and I'm only going to bead the lower. And the difference is, when you bead and box, you can pour the impression in one stage. Otherwise, if you're just going to use the beading and not the boxing, you're going to use a two-stage pour. So the anatomical portion of the impression that you're going to pour, you have to allow that to set a little bit. You have to go let that set through its initial stage, which takes about 5 to 6 minutes for regular dental stone. And then you'll be able to turn it over and complete the base model of the cast. If you don't box and you only bead and you try to do it in one stage and you do it all together, you're running the risk of the stone pulling away from the impression surface. What I'm doing here, I'm just pinching the utility wax and I'm just flaring it out a little bit, trying to make it a little bit wider. You can certainly buy utility wax that's a little bit bigger than the strip that I used here. So I want to make sure that I have enough room around this for the boxing, especially back here. And this is where things become a little challenging, so make sure you flare this area out quite a bit. So I'm thinning the wax, but certainly when you look at it from a top view, so to speak, I'm extending this portion to make sure that this part of the model does not become too thin when I apply the boxing wax. And this is even more challenging if you're going to bead and box the lower around this area back here, around the richer molar pad. So I'm going to take a piece of utility wax, and as you can see, it's not going to make it all the way around, but it'll be close. It would be nice to get the ridge parallel to the table. And as I'm looking at this now, it's not quite parallel. You can't see it from a view, but I would have to elevate the back somewhat that much to make that ridge parallel to the table. So I'll keep that in mind when I'm applying my wax. Or perhaps you can put something underneath it to support it when you're applying your wax around it. Okay? Little things that simplify the overall work. So I'm just softening the wax over my Bunsen burner off camera. You can't see it. And the key is to soften it, not to melt it. So now that the wax is softened, I'll put this little support here just to level things out. I'm just going to bring my wax around it like so. And I'm not sure if you can see from the camera, it's got a bit of a cone shape to it, so it kind of flares out in here, which is okay. Because if you make the lower half of the base really wide, it's not that hard to just trim it off with a model trimmer. It's when you start making it too narrow that you're scrambling to find enough surface on the cast to use it properly. So I'm flaring it out, right? So I'm not sure if you can see it on camera. As you can see, it's got a bit of a cone shape to it. In this back portion here, I have another piece of utility wax, and I'm going to finish it with this. So I need about, I want to have a little overlap here and a little overlap on this side. So I can cut off about that much. So I'll take this piece here and again soften it over my Bunsen burner. Obviously the height of the wax is way too high. You don't need that much height. But once this wax hardens a little bit, I can go back and cut it down. So I've overlapped it quite a bit to ensure that I have enough. I left it a little bit longer to ensure that I have enough overlap. And then I'll pinch it there. In this area here, I'll just seal it with my instrument. And don't try to get this part of the wax absolutely perfect, absolutely vertical. It's quite okay if it's almost like a cone shape like that. You see that, it's not even close. But I want to make sure that I'm not scrambling to find enough stone to trim this back after. So I'm making it a little bit bigger, and as you'll see later on when we trim this model on the model trimmer, it takes very little effort to get it nice and square again. So I'll seal this up. And same thing. Just be conscious of where you put your hands so you don't distort the wax. I'm putting my hands and I'm holding it very lightly around the periphery, right? Around the area where I applied the beading wax. You can certainly add a little bit on the inside as well. The base of the model should be around 15 to 20 millimeters past the deepest portion, which is usually the palate, right? Or the periphery. So when I look at it on the side, I can start thinking about cutting this down to the right height, or you can leave it as it is. But I think I'm going to cut it down a little bit, and I'm going to cut it a lot more than I need. So it's going to be quite longer than what I need. It's just, if you leave it too long, it makes it a little more challenging trying to pour stone into it. So I've cut off that much. I'm left with this much. The edge of the periphery is about here, and I will probably add stone to about there. So I have a little bit of wax left over. As you're manipulating the wax, just make sure that you don't accidentally pinch it in. So I'm gonna push this back out because it looks like I got a little too close to the periphery here, and this is where you're gonna make a lot of the mistakes, right here, keeping it too close. The other side looks much better. I got a couple of holes in here that I need to fill. You can fill them from this side, or you can certainly fill them from the other side. Would probably be a little bit easier, so you don't risk of splashing wax onto your impression. So those got filled rather nicely. And as it looks right now, just a final look, everything looks good. And this will allow me now to pour stone into this in a one-stage pour and maintain it upside down until the stone has completely set. With the lower, we're going to do it a little bit different. So I want you to be aware of both techniques. And I have to say that beading the lower impression has its challenges, but certainly it's not impossible. So if you wanted to utilize a double pour technique, or a two-stage pour I should say, you can do that and avoid utilizing the boxing technique. Okay, so we have enough wax on there that will allow us to get our periphery wax to seal. And this wax, as I take it out of the box, it's kind of irregular, right? It's almost flat now. So just take the time to pinch it back together. If you can make it square, that's great, or at least make it round. Okay. So I'm going to start again over here. It really doesn't matter where you start and finish, as long as you make all the way around. Over the retromolar pad, you want to get a little closer to the end. We're not going to leave 4 millimeters there. We're going to actually get real close to the edge of the retromolar pad. In here, make your way around. And usually one strip is long enough to make it all the way around, even with large cases. Just going to give it a final look here, make sure that we're at the right height. Just maybe pull it up or pull it down if you have to before you seal it to the impression. That looks good. So once again, I'm going to seal it from both sides, top and bottom. Just utilizing whatever wax is there, just to seal things together. And then just heat up your instrument, and again just glide it along on this side to make sure that you get a nice seal from both sides so nothing comes apart as you're pouring the model. So once again back here, I'm getting a little bit closer to the edge of the periphery. This, I'm a little bit too close to the edge, so move it down a bit, or you can go back and scrape it off. Make sure that you have enough height with your land area of your master cast so you're not guessing where to finish this denture once you process it. That's the whole idea. And oops, once you make your way around, although we're not going to apply a box around this like we did for the upper, okay, we are going to seal off this lingual portion of the impression. It makes it a whole lot easier to pour it, even though you're utilizing a two-stage pour. So in order to do that, what you can do, I'll take a piece of base plate wax again. This is rather small. And I'll just lay it on top like that. Take my number 7 spatula and vaguely score the wax according to the periphery here, periphery wax. I'm just gliding it along the periphery wax. And what I see, it's very difficult to see on camera. So this is what happened there. I can peel that away. And usually it fits in there. Fits in there rather nicely. I'm going to soften this piece over the Bunsen burner. And just lay it down like so. Turn this back a little bit. And then just seal it together. That way you don't have this blob of stone in your master cast that you have to go in and trim off. And it's very difficult to do it with the Reline base in there. And once more, it's always a good idea to turn it over and seal it from the other side as well, just to ensure that nothing moves around while you're trying to vibrate stone into this impression. I could add a strip of utility wax up here just to kind of block things out some more. You don't really have to, but just for the sake of the video, you can put a little bit of strip of wax there and really emphasize the overall look of the model that you're going to produce. So use your imagination. How you're going to manipulate the wax, which type of wax you're going to use. Are you going to use base plate wax or sticky wax or utility wax? There is no right or wrong, as long as the outcome justifies the means. Okay, so here we have it. We have two ways that you can prepare and produce master casts, whether you're doing Reline for dentures or whether you're doing new cases. This is the beading and boxing technique. This will allow me to keep this impression upside down at all times and use a single stage pour, whereas this one, we're gonna have to use a two-stage pour. First stage will be to fill in the anatomical portion all the way to the edge of the periphery wax, as you'll see in the next video, and then wait about 5-6 minutes for the initial setting time of the stone, and then mix up some more stone to produce the model portion by turning it over. Okay, because at this point we have to turn this one over. This one we don't, because we use boxing wax. So the next video will show you how to do that, and I'll see you there.